We're already asking the question that's going to be on everyone's mind once the credits roll on Avengers Endgame. What's next for the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Only time will tell, but like Doctor Strange, we've looked through 14 million possible futures for the MCU and have a few ideas on what we might see in Phase 4. Those of you who are slightly less obsessive about the MCU might be wondering what exactly we mean by Phase 4. Basically, while each film walks a delicate balance between being a standalone feature and a part of a much larger saga, the MCU movies are conceptually divided into phases. The idea is that while they might not necessarily be direct sequels, they each tie into each other thematically, and build to a climax that unifies everything that came before. Phase 1, which began with Iron Man in 2008, and moved through movies like Captain America, the First Avenger, Thor, and often overlooked Incredible Hulk, was all about introducing each of the superheroes on their own before bringing them together in the Avengers. Phase 2 was about building a much larger universe around them, and reframing what a superhero was by introducing cosmic heroes with vast adventures like the Guardians of the Galaxy, and micro-heroes with much smaller scale adventures like Ant-Man. Thematically, the climax of Phase 2 was Avengers Age of Ultron, which also added heroes like Vision and the Scarlet Witch to the team. And then there's Phase 3, which has been about loss and about the dire consequences that can come from noble intentions. It began with the heroes fighting each other in Captain America Civil War, and then moved through several films about heroes discovering lives and secrets in their past, such as in Thor Ragnarok, and in Black Panther, and in Captain Marvel. Now it's set to reach its endgame in, well, Endgame. So what happens in Phase 4? The future is shrouded in mystery, but one thing you can bank on is that the next few years of the MCU are going to be focused on a very different set of characters than the last few. Part of that, of course, is the inevitable product of the march of time. Chris Evans has mentioned that he'd like to be done with blockbusters and focus on smaller projects, at least for a while. And Robert Downey Jr. has expressed some similar desires to move on from Tony Stark. That makes sense too, because he's been at this for a while. Even if you don't count cameos like the one in Incredible Hulk, and only focus on the Iron Man movies and starring roles like the Avengers films and Spider-Man Homecoming, Downey has played Tony Stark in 9 films over the course of 11 years. Iron Man might be a character built for a medium that's meant to go on forever, but at some point, you can't blame a guy for wanting to take a break.
Okay, anybody on our side hiding any shocking and fantastic abilities they'd like to disclose? I'm open to suggestions.
The flip side of that is that there's some good news. While Iron Man and Captain America were the foundation of the MCU for its first decade, Phase 3 went hard at introducing a whole new crop of heroes. One of the biggest introductions came when Marvel and Sony finally reached an agreement to bring Spider-Man into the MCU, resulting in one of Marvel's best films in Homecoming. If Spider-Man was big though, Black Panther and Captain Marvel were downright massive. Both of those films were the first solo outings for their respective title characters, and both racked up over $1 billion at the box office. Add in Doctor Strange, and the MCU has more than proven that it can build an entire new generation of superhero stars to carry the torch into Phase 4. While Marvel has said they won't be officially announcing any Phase 4 projects until after Spider-Man Far From Home hits theaters in the summer of 2019, we do know a few characters we're likely to see. One is Adam Warlock, who was teased at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. He has traditionally been associated with the Infinity Stones, so it's unclear what role he might play in Phase 4, but it has been previously announced that he wouldn't be seen until Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 comes out. Then there's the Eternals. Created by the great Jack Kirby, the Eternals is set to star Angelina Jolie, and features a group of humans who long ago were experimented on and given tremendous powers by the cosmic space gods known as the Celestials, who previously cameoed in Guardians of the Galaxy. And finally, there's Shang-Chi, the master of Kung Fu, who is the world's greatest martial artist. In the comics, Shang-Chi dedicated his life to defeating the world-conquering plans of his father, an immortal Chinese villain. The announced MCU film is reportedly going to be updated for modern audiences though. So just what role Shang-Chi or any of these new faces will play in Phase 4 is still unclear. One idea that has been touched on briefly in the films is the concept of the legacy character. In the comics, a legacy character is one where new characters take over existing superhero identities once the original hero has moved on via retirement or death. Jim Rhodes was the second Iron Man, and both Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes have spent time as Captain America.
You couldn't have done that earlier?
I hate you.
So far, the only hint of this in the MCU has been with Ant-Man and the Wasp, with Scott Lang and Hope Van Dyne taking over those identities from Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne. But if Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. do indeed hang up their spandex after Avengers Endgame, it's very possible we may see Rhodey take over as Iron Man, or Bucky take over as Captain America. After all, what better way to pay homage to the founders of the MCU than by making sure their names live on forever? One safe assumption to make about the MCU going forward is that whatever storyline weaves through and unites the next 20 movies, it won't be focused on Thanos and the Infinity Stones. Once you gather up the 6 of them, forge them into a giant golden gauntlet, and kill half of the universe after all, there's really no way to top it. There's a reason beyond just a logical progression of events that leads us to think we're going to be done with the Stones though. Marvel Studios President of Production Kevin Feige collectively referred to the first 22 MCU films as the Infinity Saga. In addition to being a nice designation to fit on the side of a ridiculously expensive box set of Blu-rays, that's a pretty clear indication that the stories built around the Stones are coming to an end. So what will the next MCU saga be about? Luckily, it turns out there are plenty of possibilities. One of the things that makes it so difficult to figure out where the Marvel movies are going after Endgame is that eliminating the Infinity Stones doesn't really narrow down our options for what might take their place. In the comic book pages, Marvel has spent about 60 years creating a nearly endless supply of MacGuffins. If you're not familiar with the term, a MacGuffin is a term for a plot device that sparks the inciting incident. It's the thing that everyone's looking for, like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction, or the Maltese Falcon in the Maltese Falcon, or like the 6 magic stones that everyone in the MCU has been obsessing about for the last decade. Luckily, if Marvel decides to go the MacGuffin route again, there are plenty of candidates. For instance, the Darkhold, which is a user manual for black magic, and which appeared in Season 4 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., would be a natural starting point for a saga involving Dormammu. The Casket of Ancient Winters, which briefly appeared in the first Thor film, contains the infinite power of nature. Then there's the Evil Eye of Avalon, the Negabands, US Archer's trailer truck. The list is nearly endless. With so many to choose from, it will probably go down to which best fits the bad guys they want to use. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has had more than its fair share of incredibly powerful supervillains, from Loki and Hela to Ultron and Ego the Living Planet. But that's the nice thing about superheroes, they never seem to run out of villains. If Marvel decides to bring in another cosmic threat like Thanos, Annihilus is one obvious candidate. There are also potentially more interesting directions they could take, such as the time-traveling warlord Kang the Conqueror, or the world-eating Galactus, or they could go with a more mystical threat, such as Dormammu. When it comes right down to it, there's really just one big villain that stands out above the rest. The only thing is though, he comes with some baggage. Probably the most exciting aspect of Phase 4 is the possibility that Marvel could finally introduce MCU versions of some of their most beloved heroes and villains, including the Fantastic Four and their archenemy, Doctor Doom. Of course, these characters have appeared on film before, 3 times in fact, but you can be forgiven for forgetting that, as most fans of the characters have tried to convince themselves for years that those movies were all just a bad dream. The 3 previous Fantastic Four films were made by Fox. Now that Disney has purchased Fox, however, the rights have reverted to Marvel Studios, giving them a chance to finally get these characters right. And as we saw with Spider-Man Homecoming, nobody knows how to do Marvel characters like Marvel themselves. As exciting as it will be to finally see the Fantastic Four done well though, it's almost more exciting to consider MCU versions of some of their supporting cast, including the enigmatic Silver Surfer and Marvel's #1 supervillain, Doctor Doom. After all, if Marvel can turn a talking tree into a worldwide pop culture icon, imagine what they can do with the coolest villain in comics. For a lot of fans, the Fantastic Four pale in comparison to the big acquisition from the Disney-Fox deal, the X-Men. On their own, they're a franchise that's about as massive and complicated as the rest of the Marvel Universe put together, and they also have their own sprawling, mostly successful film franchise. The MCU so far has gone out of its way to carve out a world without mutants, to the point of referring to Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch by a similar but legally distinct M-word when they showed up at the end of Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
This is the age of miracles, Doctor. There's nothing more horrifying than a miracle.
Now that Marvel has the rights to the X-Men again though, they are free to introduce as many mutants as they want. Or not. As we've learned from superhero films, there are an infinite number of ways you can get superpowers, so it's possible in the MCU the X-Men won't be mutants at all. And if the X-Men do show up in the MCU during Phase 4, they might just wind up being used much more sparingly than they have been in their own film series. If nothing else, it would allow fans who are still attached to the Fox X-Men series to have some breathing room before reintroducing characters like Storm or Jean Grey. Whatever Marvel does in Phase 4 though, one thing is guaranteed. We'll be first in line at the theater to find out. See you there! Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite Marvel heroes are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.